Okay, welcome everyone. I think we'll get started here. It's 2 o'clock. It's so fun to see everybody joining and to see a bunch of familiar faces introducing yourselves in the chat. So anyone who hasn't done that yet, please share your name, your location, and your relationship with Farm to School. But we're going to get started. We have a lot of really fun content to cover in this webinar. I'm really excited to give an overview today of the MDA Farm to School grants. We have some really awesome presenters. We have 2 presenters from MDA who are going to give a little bit of background and some introductions on the current opportunity open right now for applications, open until November 4th at 4 p.m. You'll find out how to apply today, and you'll have an opportunity to ask some questions as well. And then we're also going to hear from some actual MDA Farm to School recipients. We have one presenter, Stephanie, who is from Northfield Public Schools, who's going to share her story. And we also have a little video of another partner from Winona, Jennifer, who's going to share her story as well. So we want you all to hear from a peer who's actually done this process and knows what it's like, and we'll have time for all of you to ask some questions as well. You can ask questions at any time throughout the presentation. Please, if you look at your Zoom, and you'll see if you move your cursor around and look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a little icon for Q&A. If you put your questions in there, that'll help me keep track of them, and then I'll make sure to direct them to the right people, and we'll go over the questions at the end of today's presentation. Otherwise, I wanted all of you to be aware that we are recording. We had a lot of people who said they couldn't make it today. We're going to share the recording of this webinar with everyone who registered after the fact. So if you want to relive your favorite parts of this webinar, you'll have a chance. We'll be sending that email out afterwards. But otherwise, let's get started. I'm going to pass it over to our partner, Ashley Bress from MDA, and she'll give you a little bit of background on this Farm to School grant support from her agency.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erin. Yeah, so here at the Department of Agriculture, the grant is primarily administered by my colleague, Emily Mayer, who you're going to hear from pretty extensively today. We also have one staff member, Lisa Sawyer, who also works on these grants. Unfortunately, she's out on a long-term leave for a while, so Emily has graciously stepped in to run this grant program. But I just want you to be aware that you may also be hearing from my colleague Lisa at some point in the time. Can we go on to that next slide? All right. At the Department of Agriculture, as I said, we administer the Farm to School grants. We have done this since 2013 through our Agricultural Growth Research and Innovation program, which we refer to as AGRI. So it's AGRI, but we always say AGRI. This is money that we get from the state legislature every year, through which we fund about a dozen different programs, including the Farm to a School grant. We really look at this as an economic development program for farmers or for agriculture, and that's going to be something that's important to keep in mind as you think about your Farm to a School grant. But we have been doing some form of Farm to School grant making since 2013. I ran the program directly for a number of years. During that time, we primarily focused on kitchen equipment, as well as feasibility and planning studies. Over the last couple of years, we started to transition a bit and into also funding milk coolers for a short period of time. And then since last fiscal year, we have been focusing our efforts on actually helping schools purchase Minnesota grown and raised food. So beginning last year was the first year that we did our farm to school first bite and full tray grants. We had our initial cohort of grantees. And if we move on to that second slide, you can get an idea of who received the grants last year. So we have a wide swath of schools who have received grants. These are going to be good schools that, as you're thinking about what you want to do for this year, that they're going to be really good ones to reach out to for help. A lot of these schools are just getting started, but hopefully you can see when one of your peers, one of your friends, one of your colleagues reflected in the last year's grant. But we do want to get an idea of who is on the call today, so that we know how much experience you have with Farm to a School grants. So if we can go to that first poll, actually the only poll, that would be great. All right, so there should be a poll coming up on your screen here shortly. We just want to know, have you received a grant from the MBA before, whether that was in the form of kitchen equipment or a first bite or a full Troy grant? Maybe you have never received a grant before, but you've applied for one. Have you thought about applying but just haven't done so? Maybe you don't know anything about this, just we'll give you about 60 seconds to respond to them polls so that we all can have a better idea of who is on the call today. All right, I'm hoping just about everybody has had the chance to respond. I don't know if we're able to see the results and where they're at yet. All right, well, you know what, this is really surprising to me that only about 26% of you have received one of our grants before. That's pretty exciting for me, and especially to know that we have some folks on here who don't know anything about our grants or haven't applied for one before. So that'll be great and then help us in a form going forward. Especially for you folks who are new to the Farm to a School world, I'd like to introduce a video from Jennifer Walters from Winona, and hopefully she can give you a quick overview or a quick testimony about what her experience has been with the grant program.
I'm Jennifer Walters, and I am the School Nutrition Director at Winona Area Public Schools. I'm a registered dietitian, and I recently received my MBA, so I'm pretty excited about that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we are talking today about the Minnesota Department of Agriculture Farm to School grants, and specifically you were a recipient of the First Bite Farm to School grant. What motivated you to apply?
Well, I've always wanted to support our local farmers. I think it's extremely important. So that's probably the first reason why I applied. The second reason is it can be kind of expensive to purchase things locally, and having this grant available is wonderful. It's such a benefit to all of us to have those funds.
Did you have any hesitations going into the application, or was there anything you were worried about?
I really can't think of anything I was worried about going into the application. I think making sure that you do your research of where you can purchase some local products is beneficial, and those are some things that you need to kind of gather ahead of time before you sit down and write the grant.
And would you share any of the positive outcomes that you think make it worthwhile for you to apply and get this grant?
It's wonderful. I mean, you can, for example, our apple orchard, we can say, these awesome apples that we're eating are from, Longhorn Orchard, and like, oh, those are really good. And this squash was picked right, from our students' garden and brought in. And it's fun to have the farmers come in to the school so people can see like, oh, you're the person that grew these carrots. And
Oh, great. Would you share, do you have any advice for food service directors if they're considering applying, maybe they've never applied for a grant like this before? What advice would you give them to get ready and to apply for this grant?
well, the grant it is pretty self-explanatory, but one thing that I like is the timeline. So, it helped me make sure that, oh, I need to talk to this farmer and this farmer and this farmer, because the farmers do need to plant enough for you. So that's important to say, I'll be interested in purchasing some green beans from you.
Well, do you have any other comments you'd like to share, or anything else that you would tell a food service director out there who's thinking about applying?
I think just, think about five products that you want to start bringing into your schools, and, start there, just pick a number.
I really wish we could give Jennifer a virtual round of applause, but I think it'd be a little weird if we all just sat in our offices and did that. But we'll just pretend, but we'll just tell her thank you anyway. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Emily, who's going to give a pretty thorough explanation about the grant programs.
All right, thank you, Ashley. It looks like I cannot turn my video on, but I can hop in and maybe we can get that started as I'm going. Oh, here we go. All right, thanks. So my name is Emily. I work with the Minnesota Department of Agriculture, and as Ashley mentioned, I oversee the farm to school grants. Currently, we have 2 grants that are available for schools. In total, we have $748,000 to allocate to schools to support your farm to school efforts and increase your capacity to serve Minnesota grown and raised foods in your cafeteria in your school lunch program. So our application is currently open. You have until November 4th at 4 o'clock sharp to submit your applications. You'll be notified if you receive an award in December or January of this coming up. And then you will be able to use your funds until August 31st of 2023. So just sort of helping you to figure out your planning timeline. Those are some important dates to remember. If you're interested in applying, you can go onto our website, Minnesota Farm to School, or Minnesota Department of Agriculture Farm to School website. That'll branch you off into either the full tray or the first bite grants, and then you can apply online through our grant management system. And if you need any help with that, let me know. Next slide, please. So we currently have 2 grants. We have the First Bite Mini Grant. This is a grant that's for schools who are new to farm to school. So you might not have brought any local products into your cafeteria before. These grants are smaller so that you can just sort of dip your toes in the water and get a feel for what farm to school looks like. You can request between $2,500 and $5,000 per school district, and there's no match required for your request. These grants are intended to support high impact farm to school efforts. So maybe you're going to start with just a taste test of a local product, or you might want to participate in the Great Lakes Apple Crunch and you're looking to find a local farmer to supply your apples. This grant is intended to help you sort of figure out those first steps of farm to school. And because you are new to the grant program, you're new to, maybe you don't have relationships built with farmers in your area yet, letters of support are not required. So it's really just sort of, figuring out what farm to school is and how you can roll it out at your school. Next slide, please. So our other grant that we have available is the full tray grant. This grant is intended for schools or school districts with at least some prior farm to school experience. And the intent is to just help you to grow your relationships with farmers, grow your capacity to bring local foods into your schools, and just sort of ramp up your farm to school programs. So this program, or this grant, you can request up to $35,000, but this is based off of the number of meals that you served in October 2019. So it's a little bit of a math equation that you need to figure out. So it's the number of meals served times 10 cents times 10 months is how you figure out what you are eligible to request. So if you look at the example on the screen, if you serve 7,500 reimbursable lunches plus 5,000 breakfasts, and you times that by 10 cents times 10 months, you would be eligible for $12,500 in grant funds. This grant, because it's for schools who already kind of know what they're doing a little bit, a one-to-one match is required, so that those matching funds would be additional food purchases. So if you request $12,500 for your grant, then your total amount of money that you would be spending on local foods would be $25,000. If you have questions about the match component, reach out where we can help you figure that piece out. And letters of support are required for this grant. So we would like to see letters of support from the farmers and the producers who you will be working with. If you choose, you can add additional letters of support from producers who you might be wanting to incorporate into your farm to school program, distributors who work with local farmers. We would want to know what farms they're working with and the location of those farms, and also community partners who are involved in your farm to school program, and who can just sort of speak to the efforts that you're doing at your school. So next slide, please. So in addition to the First Bite and the full tray grants, there is an extra little level of funding that you can request, and that's to purchase equipment that's going to help you buy, prepare, or serve more Minnesota grown and raised foods in your cafeteria. So in addition to your First Bite and full tray grant request, you can request up to $25,000 in additional funds to purchase the equipment that is going to help you to process and prepare those foods. This grant requires a one-to-one match. It can either be additional local food that you're purchasing. So if you're requesting grant funds, the grant funds cannot count as the match, but you can purchase additional foods on top of that. Or it can be the other half of the equipment costs that you're requesting. This is a little bit confusing. We recognize that, but call or email us with questions and we can help you figure out how to request those funds. In the RFP, which is available on the Farm to School website, there's also some pretty specific examples that kind of break down the different scenarios of, I'm requesting this for a First Bite and I'm requesting this for equipment. What is my match? That kind of thing. So hopefully you can figure that out. Next slide, please. So a really common question that we get is, what items can I purchase with the Farm to School grants? So some of the eligible Minnesota grown items would be local fruits and vegetables, meat, fish and poultry, dairy products, eggs, and local grains. Items that are not eligible for this grant funding would be fluid milk, school garden produce, and items that are grown or produced in a state other than Minnesota. So if your school district is located on the border of Minnesota and another state, just be aware that you need to purchase items from Minnesota. It can't be the farmer who's located across the way. So next slide, please. So this is just sort of a breakdown to kind of get your wheels spinning about different products that other grant recipients have purchased. So in 2020, we had a rapid response grant. We awarded $127,000 to Minnesota schools to purchase local products. And then we had the help from the U of M to sort of analyze the data of what those funds, what types of products those funds went to. So if you look at the pie chart, just a little over 50% went to fruits and vegetables. Those are kind of the things that jump to your brain when you think of farm to school. So that could be, you know, carrots, potatoes, apples, things like that. One thing that we all kind of found interesting was that almost 35% of those funds went to purchase local meat. So that could be local hot dogs if you're featuring those in your cafeteria, ground beef, ground turkey to make patties or meatballs or something like that. About 5% of the funds went to cheese products. Another 5% of the funds went to local flour and grains to make breads or biscuits, things like that. And then 4% of the funds fell into our other category, which was honey or maple syrup, so local sweeteners, and sunflower oil also fell into that. So just kind of something to see, maybe something you didn't think of that you could purchase locally that you might be able to use in your cafeteria. Next slide, please. And then this is just a breakdown of the dollar amounts of fruits and vegetables that were purchased with the grant funds. So if you see some of the big popular items were tomatoes and radishes. The other items that were pretty popular were items that could easily be served in a salad bar. You get the product whole, chop it up, put it on the line, and get local foods out quickly and easily. Some other products that were purchased, like Brussels sprouts, beets, kohlrabi, some of those more unique food items. Those might have been served in like a taste test or a one-day like feature on the menu, just to sort of introduce students to different fruits and vegetables. But again, this is just a good resource to sort of see like, oh, I didn't think that I could purchase local garlic to serve in the cafeteria. So if you are new to Farm to School and don't have connections with local producers, you can reach out to the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. We can help you. The Farm to School leadership team can help, and also the Minnesota Grown website. We have a wholesale category for farmers who are interested in selling in larger quantities. So that's a really great place to start as well. So with that would be my last slide. I believe we're taking questions at the end. So I'm going to pass it off to Stephanie Strami. She is from the Northfield Public Schools and is a current Farm to School grantee. So take it away, Stephanie.
Thank you, Emily. I'm going to start my video here. All right. So this is my 8th school year as Director of Child Nutrition at Northfield Public Schools. We're located about an hour south of the Twin Cities, for those of you who are not familiar with where Northfield is. In our district, we serve about 3,800 students. We have 1 high school, 1 middle school, 3 elementary schools, an area learning center, a community education center, and all of those meals are prepared on site at each of our schools. We do try to incorporate as much scratch or semi-scratch cooking as possible. And we do have to transport food from our high school over to our ALC. And then one of our elementary schools prepares foods for the community education center. We transport food over there for them. This year, we've been serving approximately 1,000 breakfasts each day and about 2,400 to 2,500 lunches each day. So as you can see in this photo, this is our superintendent, Matt Hillman, on the left, myself, and Representative David Bly, and leadership from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. This was back in 2018 when we received an AGRI Farm to School grant for some equipment and then also for some food products. These individuals came in, took a tour of the kitchen. We had lunch with the students. It was a Thursday, so we featured a Minnesota Thursday meal. And all of the food at that lunch, or majority of that food from the lunch, was featured from Minnesota producers. We used Thousand Hills all beef hot dogs that day, which is from Cannon Falls, about 15 miles northeast of Northfield. We used watermelon radishes, which is from a farm here in Northfield called Open Hands. Corn on the cob from Paul Farms, that we actually were able to get through our distributor. And it's kind of nice because distributors are sometimes able to get local produce as well. We also have a few orchards in our area. These apples were specifically from the Fireside Apple Orchard in Northfield. And then for a dessert, we had Johnny Pops, which is a popsicle that originated by some St. Olaf students, in addition to some other people, I believe. But these St. Olaf students go to St. Olaf, which is located in Northfield. So we always like to feature that product for them as well. You can go to the next slide, please. Right. Northfield School District, we've applied for 3 AGRI grants and we've received 3 AGRI grants over the last several years. The second grant listed, the 2020 grant, is actually now called the First Bite Mini Grant, I believe. So you're probably more familiar with it, titled that, than the Rapid Response Farm to School Grant. If you've never applied for these grants, which it was fun to see the poll that was taken earlier, that many of you haven't done these grants before and are just learning about them. I know I was very hesitant at first when all of the emails would come out and encourage us to apply. And I thought, oh, it's always so much work to do grants and there's so much follow-up and things like that. These grants are super easy to apply for. The staff who you work with, I worked quite closely with Lisa Sawyer and then Ashley Bress. Any questions that I'd have, they were great at communicating, emailing, over the phone. It was very user-friendly. The process was very simple. Many of the farmers want to work with you and they want us to use their products. So they're quick to respond. The third grant, the 2021 for this school year, the full tray grant, we did have to get some letters of reference from local farmers, and they were very quick to respond and get those out there because of course they want to encourage farm to school. I felt that probably the hardest thing or the most time consuming part of the application was just gathering some of the historical data of the farm to school purchases that we had maybe used in years past. And Jennifer, I think, kind of mentioned that it's just gathering some of the data. And really, it's not that difficult. I worked with our Department of Finance, and they were able to pull records. We were able to look at old POs so that it was really pretty easy to gather the information. But that was just, I would say, probably one of the more time-consuming parts of the application. Our first grant, the one in 2017, the AGRI grant for equipment, we were able to actually purchase a combi oven and a countertop freezer. And we were able to do this. There was a match. It was about $11,000 were funded by the state, and then Blue Cross Blue Shield matched with that. And the school, then we had to pay about $4,500 of the grant also to be able to match with that. In our project overview, which we were required to include, we just indicated that the freezer was to be used primarily for a la carte items to support local companies such as Johnny Pops, Mix Me's frozen yogurt. And then the combi oven, we would enable the school to use to be able to produce things more efficiently, prepare vegetables from local farmers. We had actually, when we first submitted the grant, we were thinking of purchasing a steamer because one of our steamers we knew was going to be on the outs and we were going to need to replace that. And we thought it was perfect timing. But as we thought through it and looked at the types of items that we were producing, the food that we were making in our middle school. We decided that a combi oven would probably suit our needs better. And so I was able to work with, I'm pretty sure it was Lisa and Ashley, this was a few years ago, but they were really flexible, and we kind of talked through our needs, why we wanted to switch to the combi oven, and then we were just able to go out to bid and make that change for the combi oven. So it was super easy to work with everybody on the process. They really listened to all of our needs that we had. So if you're intimidated like I am or was with the grant process and all of the follow-up that is typical with grants and the tracking, this one I feel is really pretty simple. They send out a survey and you complete the survey with that. It's a really great way to add, and I'll say quote, I don't know if my video is on, I can't tell, but in quotations, add free dollars to your budget, which we can all use these days. I would say if you're hesitant to apply, you should try to start with a small dollar amount and then expand with future grant opportunities. Jennifer had mentioned, pick those 5 items that maybe you want to be focusing on. And, even if it's 1 or 2, if you're starting with apples or something, and you can look back to how much you've spent on apples and be able to get some of your dollars recuperated from this grant, it's a great idea. So that's kind of how we approached it when we first started out with the grants. Next slide, please. So we continue to work with local farmers in an effort to expand our farm to school products. In Northfield, we're very fortunate to have a lot of farmers who live right around our area. We have several who are basically on the back door of many of our schools. Prior to the pandemic, we began purchasing from the Good Acre. And what was really nice with that is the Good Acre comes down in our area and works with a lot of these local farmers. What had happened was we were increasing the number of farms that we were working with, but that also meant we were increasing the number of deliveries. And then the farmers, it takes a lot out of their day to have to deliver to the schools. Oftentimes, they would deliver maybe to 1 or 2 of our schools, and then we would have to go and separate out and deliver to the other schools. So it just became easier because Good Acre came down in this area and we were kind of able to do a one-drop shop with them, and it worked out really well. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we didn't work with Good Acre last year or this year, but we definitely plan to incorporate them back into our farm to school program. In the future, they're great. They're wonderful partners. They have a lot of educational materials when you're trying to build your farm to school program. So as you can see, some of these I've already mentioned, but Revel Greens is down in Medford. They do a lot of, they're a salad, a hydroponic company that does lettuce and things like that. We were actually able through our DOD dollars able to get Revel Greens. That was something that was on there and we had noticed that and tried that. So that was exciting. And then also our Northfield Middle School had received a grant to get indoor vertical gardens. And so we were able to use some of those things with them on that as well. All right, next slide, please. So even through the pandemic, we continued to work with local farmers in an effort to support them, to support our program, to show families the importance of serving quality, nutritious meals to our kids. And so last year, when we received the First Bites Farm to School grant in the amount of $5,000, we were able to purchase apples from Fireside Orchard again. And then we also purchased turkey from Ferndale Farms. And we created a to-go meal for our curbside meals for families to come and pick up. It was a homemade apple crisp and then the Ferndale turkey with mashed potatoes. Because of the grant funding, we were able to provide this meal with a very low food cost. It was about 53 cents per meal. The labor was approximately 78 cents per meal is what we calculated out. So a total cost then of $1.31. And looking at the reimbursement over expenses, we had $2.84 to our advantage, if you want to say. As I had mentioned before, this grant opportunity is a great way to extend dollars in your budget, which we really know is important in this day and age. So next slide, please. These are just a few photos of some of the things we were able to bring in: fresh watermelon from some of the farms, beans in the lower right-hand corner. Again, you'll see apples. We had some peppers, broccoli from, I believe it was Open Hands Farm, and then the squash on the lower right side of that tray was something that we were able to purchase and also use in our meals. And then in the upper left hand is another turkey meal that we were able to serve to our students. So that is all that I have. And I think now the plan is to do question and answers.
That is correct. Yes, and that's great because we have so many questions coming in. This is really awesome. Oh my gosh, Stephanie, thank you for your amazing presentation. I feel like that is exactly the kind of information that people want to hear when they're considering applying and haven't done it before. It's just wonderful to have some peers to share what it's like from your perspective. So thank you so much. We are going to go into the Q&A portion now. And I know have been submitting your questions throughout the presentations, which is great. If you can submit them through the Q&A instead of the chat, that helps me keep track of which ones have been answered, and then they don't get buried with other messages that are coming through in the chat as well. But I'm going to do my best to try to keep the ones that are in there, and if I miss them, please resubmit them again in the Q&A part, and then I'll for sure see them. But I'm just going to start with the ones that are in the Q&A right now. So question about eligible applicants. And Julie wants to know, can individual schools apply, or does the application have to come through the school district? And with my fellow presenters, if your bandwidth can handle coming off of your, showing your video screen again, will come back all together, and anyone who can answer this question, I'll turn it over to either Ashley or Emily to answer this eligibility question.
Okay, so I think in almost every circumstance, it would be the actual school district who would apply. But that doesn't mean that individual school wouldn't be eligible as an individual school. I just can't think of a situation in which that has happened. But if you do have a unique situation, I'd be happy to try to talk through that a little bit.
Great, thank you. Related to that, I did see a question in the chat where a small school was wondering, so this person's school has 55 students, so they are a small school, and they were wondering, can we really benefit from this grant if we're a small school?
Yeah, a small school can definitely benefit. Even as a really small school, at least in that first year, you're still eligible for up to $5,000. So, and I can't imagine that $5,000 wouldn't help out a really small school. And there'll also be, and especially being in southwestern Minnesota, I think you said, I am super confident you'd be able to locate a farmer in your area that'd be eager to participate in Farm to School. And there's a very good chance that you can have a farmer, who's maybe their kids are students in your district, and that's a really powerful thing when those kids are sitting around the lunch table and they're able to be like, my mom, my dad grew this apple, or whatever product it is that you're serving. There's definitely opportunities for you as a really small district. And if you need any connections with other schools in southwestern Minnesota that are doing Farm to School, I'd be happy to connect you with some of those schools.
Yeah, that's so great. There's one other eligibility question that's come up. Do you have to be enrolled in the National School Lunch Program, or can you apply if you're in the Seamless Summer Program?
Sure. Yeah, this is all a little bit different during COVID. We totally realized that a number of schools had to move to different USDA options. My colleague Sammy, I'm sure can answer a lot more of those specific questions. But if in general you would be on NSLP, then you are eligible for this money. And we're going back and using your reimbursable meals from October of 2019, because that was still when things were normal, rather than basing your grant amount on what, on your meals served in October of 2020.
That's great. So we also have had some questions about eligible expenses. So one that's in the Q&A here is, can grant money be used to pay for the additional time spent preparing the food as well as the food itself?
I can take that. So this grant, it can only be used to purchase food and equipment. Staff time is not an eligible expense for this grant. So no.
So
yeah,
no.
Unfortunately, no.
But that does occur to me, if they were applying for the full trade grant that requires a match, can you use staff time to meet your match, or does it have to be hard costs?
Yeah, so the match can only be additional food expenses. So it would be matching what you're purchasing with more food purchases, just to sort of increase the impact for Minnesota farmers.
Yep. And keeping that same intent in mind, we had some people who were wondering about gardening materials. I know you covered that a little bit in your presentation, but can you purchase anything to put in a garden at your school and grow your own food?
Yeah, so school gardens are not part of the Farm to School grant at this time. The MBA also offers an urban ag grant, and that grant covers the cost of equipment and staff time to run urban ag projects. I also administer that grant, so if you're interested in that and you need more information, feel free to reach out to me. And there'll be an updated RFP for that grant available very soon. So if that sounds like something that could be of interest for your school, then let me know.
That is great to hear. And then with that kind of same question about eligible costs, someone had asked about, can you purchase a delivery truck to pick up and deliver food? Thinking about how sometimes you want to, it's a logistics question about getting local food.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Ashley.
No, I think that's one that Emily and I are going to need to think about a little bit more. We don't feel good answering that one on this webinar, so we'll get back to you, Jennifer, and we'll also post a Q&A on our website.
Okay, very good. Someone also asked if honey was eligible, local Minnesota honey.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. I think sometimes, as you mentioned, people think about fruits and vegetables as like the first example of farm to school food, but definitely you can move beyond that to other local products from Minnesota producers. And it's great that honey is eligible. I love that more and more schools are using local meat and protein. It's really exciting. So feel free to think outside the box and dream big. I love that. One other question that came up that I've heard a couple times outside of this presentation too is about the First Bite grants. And if you've received a First Bite grant in the past, are you able to apply for the First Bite again, or would you have to move up to the full tray?
Yeah, so if you were a First Bite recipient last year, then you would need to apply for the full tray because you've already had some farm to school experience. And then the full tray would help you to just sort of build on what you already created through the First Bite. And the first bite does have a match, so that's something just to keep in mind too.
Mhm.
The other thing that I would add on to that is that even if you're a larger school and maybe you're eligible for 15,000, 20,000 through the full tray grant, you don't have to apply for that full amount. You can still apply for a smaller amount, an amount that you think you can realistically use and match.
That's a really great point. Okay, this was asked in several different ways. People are wondering how to connect with farmers. Where can you find farmers? Is there a list of farmers in my area? Do you have to use certain farmers that are identified by MDA, or can you use any farmer? So what would you suggest for finding farmers in your area?
I would say the best place to get started is by reaching out to past recipients that are in your area to see where they purchased from, who they worked with. So on our website, we have a tab that is all of the first bite past recipients, all of the full tray past recipients, and then just all of our farm to school grants from 2013. And the schools who receive funding, and just if you need contact info, reach out to us and we can help you get in touch with those schools. Also, the Minnesota Grown Wholesale Directory is a great place to start. So I mentioned that earlier, and I think that link got put in the chat. But that's just farmers who are able to sell on a larger scale. So if you're looking for apples for your entire school district or apples for your whole high school, like those are farmers who have capacity to sell you sell to you in those quantities. Also, I mean, you can reach out to me or Ashley, anybody on the farm to school leadership team. Sammy at MDE is a great resource as well. So there's lots of people who are more than happy to help you find farmers in your area.
Can I ask Stephanie, how did you find your farmers?
So it was really just kind of working with word of mouth. We had started working with Thousand Hills. The director previous to me had been working with Thousand Hills, and I had worked with Thousand Hills in a previous job, so I knew them and had built that relationship. And then as you're talking to others, they start talking about, oh, well, do you know so-and-so from the seeds farm, or, knowing Todd from the Fireside Orchard, or, and just kind of then building that relationship, or hearing from people in the community who have maybe worked with them. We do have two colleges in town, St. Olaf College and Carleton College, and they work with farmers. And so, just kind of being in with those people and talking with people within the community, you hear about people that are doing things and then just connecting with them. And then also going to various events like this where you learn and you might hear of somebody's name and you're like, oh, well, they said Northfield, that's in Northfield. So then, just connecting with that person when we come home, just kind of Googling their farm and connecting with them that way. Once you hear their name and know that they're maybe within a, 15, 30-minute radius or mile radius of where you are.
Yeah, thank you. And I will say too, someone had asked in the chat earlier about, do the farmers actually benefit from these programs? And if so, how? And I will say I work with a lot of farmers. They love this program because they know that for some of you, sometimes the cost of local items is the barrier that's standing in your way from being able to purchase from them. And, they might be, sometimes, this isn't even always the case, but sometimes they might have slightly higher prices than what you might be able to get if you're getting something from like a giant monocultural farm in California or something like that. But let's say you want to keep your money local, invest in your local community. If you get this grant, you can have an extra $5,000 or more if you're going for a full tray that can boost your purchasing power. And that can be the thing that lets you buy from a local farm for the first time and lets you pay the price that it costs for them to sell on the market. And I don't know, Ashley or Emily, have you heard from farmers about what they think about this program and what benefit it is to them?
Yeah, we really only hear good things from farmers about it. Not every, farm to school isn't a good fit for every farmer, and that's okay. But for some farmers, this is one more income stream for them. I don't think we know of any farmers who are only selling via farm to a school, but our hope is that this is just one additional revenue stream for them, in addition to whatever else they're doing, whether they have a CSA, they're doing farmers markets, they're selling to grocery stores and again, co-ops. But it's just one more revenue stream for them that they can benefit from.
That's a great point. I've also seen farmers who use this as kind of a stepping stone to scale up to be selling wholesale. So like Open Hands Farm that was mentioned, they started growing carrots in a larger way so that they could meet the demand from schools, but that helped them get into other markets as well. So I think there are a lot of benefits for farmers, but probably, yes, that's not their sole way of making money either.
And Erin, I will add too, like if you have your own little town local market or farmers markets, to just go in, and that's a way to meet with the farmers too and just ask them, I will introduce myself and just say I'm the director of child nutrition, and do you work with schools currently, and if not, and they might recommend and say no, but I know this farmer who does, or it's just another way to make that connection. But we have a market every Saturday down in our town square that there's a lot of farmers who come in with products.
Really good. Yes, I love that. Okay, I have a couple more questions that I think we can get to. We're gonna have to wrap it up in just a couple minutes here. So one person was asking if they've never done farm to school before, do the farmers generally bring the food to the school or do they have to go get it? And then another person asked, how does this actually work? You contact a farmer, set up a deal and account to get the product from them and then pay them just like a vendor. Does anyone have some kind of how this works information for a couple people who are considering doing this for the first time?
So I'll say for the delivering part of it, we usually, depending on the amount that we order, say we're bringing in watermelons and they're really heavy, and we have a lot of cases coming in, or cantaloupe, then the farmers will work with us and maybe deliver to 2 of the sites. But then I might meet them, or we might have a vehicle from the district meet, and then we load up and have to bring to the other schools because they're just not able to get around. It's not an efficient process for them, at least some of the farmers that we've worked with, to go around to each of those schools. If they're in town delivering to the colleges, we kind of set up and know what days they're going to be in town at the same time and can meet with them. Again, like some of the meat companies, Ferndale Farms, Thousand Hills, they might be a little more willing to drop at 2 sites. We do have 2 schools that are basically across the street from each other, so at least that helps because they're close in proximity. But otherwise, I would say historically, we've been the ones that we meet and then we disperse it out to the other schools.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen schools do it many different ways. Some of them purchase directly from one farmer. Some of them go through a food hub, like what Stephanie was talking about with the Good Acre. And I think the delivery can be different ways. It is kind of something that you kind of have to work out with your own individual situation. And, sometimes, you can get items through your distribution company sometimes as well that are local. So you could, sometimes people will go through their current existing distribution company. So it can be very flexible and it kind of adapts to whatever works for your model of food delivery and food service. Another question back to MDA is, does the grant have an expiration date for the funding?
Sure. We really want you to try to use the money by August of 2023. So we're really kind of looking at the 22 to 2023 school year. That being said, if you get into a bind and you can't use all of your money by August of 2023, we can usually work out an extension for that, but you have to communicate with us to make that happen. But I also always encourage people, don't ask for more money than what you think you can really spend. Otherwise, that's just money that we can't award to another school district that would be able to use it.
Mhm. And then one last question. Someone is asking about how our growing season is short in Minnesota, and can farmers still get products to us during the winter months? And I definitely have heard this a lot, recognizing that our school year doesn't line up with the height of our growing season in Minnesota. But what have you all seen from MDA?
Yeah, you know what, January, February, those are all really great times to be trying to do like turkey and beef and pork for them first time. You know, even though you might not be able to get strawberries, then it doesn't mean that there isn't another local product that you can. Or that's a really good time to be focusing on those value-added products like Johnny Pops and Mix Me.
Mm-hmm. And I will say too, I have seen farmers delivering storage products like onions or winter squash, potatoes, things like that into February. I've seen my farmer partners doing that. Yeah. I'm afraid we are out of time for questions, because I have a little bit of housekeeping information here to share at the end. Cecilia, if you wouldn't mind sharing our last couple slides here. This has been great to hear what people are thinking about. If you have more questions that we weren't able to get to during the Q&A section, please just send an email and we can definitely get back to you on any questions that you may have, because we want to make sure you have all the information you need. And also, we recognize, you have 1 month left to get your application together. So you have plenty of time to ask questions, find out what you need to know, and still craft your application. And it's not a very complicated application. So just so you know, don't feel panicked if we didn't get to answer you right away. I wanted to highlight, and Cecilia, if you have our slides, I just wanted to let everyone know, and especially because some of you are new to the farm to school world, we do have a Minnesota farm to school leadership team that supports farm to school in Minnesota. There are several of our organizations, I think there are maybe 11 officially organizations that are part of the leadership team, and it was originally co-convened by Extension, U of M Extension, and the Department of Health. But now there's also organization Renewing the Countryside that does farm to school and early care work, MISA, that support. So if you go to the next slide, there's one thing that I wanted to highlight.
Erin, Erin, your sound is cutting out just a little bit.
Oh shoot. Okay, let's see if it can last. There's just 2 more minutes left here. This is one opportunity I wanted to highlight for everybody. We are doing monthly office hours where members of the leadership team are coming together to just answer questions that you have. And if you have more questions about this grant, you could come to our office hours. It's the first Wednesday of the month from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. So it's going to be actually this week. You could come there and ask your questions and we will answer them and follow up. We could also help you with finding farmers, any kind of technical, logistical questions that you have. We're there, and there are a lot of different people with different areas of expertise that can help you. So you just register one time, and then I'm typing the link into the chat for you, all of you as well. You register one time and then you can join every month after that, once a month, to get just continual support with your farm to school activities. And then the last slide I believe that we have here, Oh yes, and we have Minnesota grown promotional items from MDA. Those are available to you if you want to highlight your local products on the lunch line and make sure that the kids know what items are local. Those are great to do some promotion of your activities. You can contact MDA and can get those, and I believe they're free. That's correct, right? As long as you just request them from MDA. Emily, you were going to say.
That's correct. They are free.
Perfect. So that is a great way to let everyone know what you're doing and make sure that they recognize the difference that local foods bring to your trays. And then the last thing that I will say, so we are going to share the recording of this webinar with everyone who registered, whether they attended or not. And I will compile the links to the different resources that were mentioned today, because I know we had a lot of great information so that all of you can follow up with those things. We'll you want to do. Remember, you can start small. You can start if it's your first time with that first bite grant, or you can level up with
Erin, your sound is cutting out again.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to mention that the last legislative session, they doubled the funding for this grant. So it should be
Erin, you cut out again. Once more.
Better. I just want to make sure that all of you know that the funding for this program has been doubled in the last legislative session. So you would have a good chance of getting month left to get your ideas together, get your application together, ask us any questions that you have. But I hope that many of you apply, and I'm so glad that there's such strong interest. But thank you all for joining us today. Thank you so much to my fellow presenters. And we look forward to seeing all of your ideas in your applications.